The Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. This directive caused a lot of turmoil at the beginning of the year for political reasons. The scope of this directive was reduced. There were a lot of political discussions. It was supposed to enter into force much earlier. In the end, it still entered into force, but only in the summer. So its main aim is to foster responsible corporate behavior, essentially to assess, prevent, mitigate, and bring to an end potential and actual human rights and environmental adverse impacts. As I said earlier, it entered into force already in July 2024. However, this does not mean that it's already applicable. It will become applicable gradually and depending on the size of the company. So you have all the examples here. The first companies that it will be applicable for would be sort of larger companies with over 5,000 employees and a net turnover of more than 150 million within the union. Right, so that was the first one. We continue with the ban on forced labor regulation. Essentially, this regulation, what it does is that it tackles the issue of forced labor in the supply chain. It's important to note that it covers all products circulating within the EU. So this means that it covers products made in the EU for domestic consumption, but also for export, as well as imported goods. So there was a political agreement in April 2024. Or now, it was quite long, as with all European legislation, but it's now set to enter into force, we think, before the end of December, so before the end of the year, because all the votes that are necessary to approve it have taken place already. And we think, again, if this follows through, that it should enter into applicability by the end of 2027. If not, it will probably be beginning of 2028. OK, so we start with the third directive, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, already in place. So this directive essentially sets reporting requirements on the company's impact on the environment, human rights, and social standards in general, and governance, in line with the EU climate goals, of course. So the entry into force was January 2023. And then there was a series of secondary legislation. It's a bit more complicated. I will get into it in a second. But important to note that while it entered into force in January 2023, it will be in the coming year that this directive will be directly applicable. Basically, large public interest companies will have to report in 2025 for 2024, essentially. Then in 2025, it will be the turn of large companies that were previously not subject to the non-financial disclosure directive. And then 2026 for listed SMEs with an opt-out measure for 2028. So again, a bit complicated. This is all also online, of course, the deadlines. But essentially, nobody has started reporting yet. It will happen in 2025 for the first batch of companies. But first thing first, what is the Deforestation Regulation and why is there? So the Deforestation Regulation basically places obligations on placing and making available on the EU market products that contain the following goods. So cattle, cocoa, coffee, palm oil, rubber, soy, and wood. As for the timeline, I know you can see maybe too many dates, but the important ones are the ones at the end. So the regulation was set to enter into applicability now on the 30th of December. However, there was a new, as I said before, because of all this political turmoil, it was decided that it will be postponed of 1 year. We still don't have the final vote, but this will likely happen, we can say, with confidence. So the new applicability date will be 30th of December 2025 for larger companies and 30th of June 2026 for SMEs. But again, we need to have the final rubber stamp before saying this for sure. Very final legislation is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. This is probably not relevant for everyone. It is mostly for hard goods, because it sets reporting requirements for emissions of the following goods. So cement, iron, steel, aluminium, fertilizers, electricity, hydrogen, and some byproducts. It's already applicable, as I said earlier. It entered into force in May 2023. And the start of the transitional phase was October 2023. So this is quite unique. It's quite a unique regulation because it has a transitionary phase and a definite phase, and the requirements for these two phases differ quite a lot. So the start of the definite period will be January 2026, in a year. And this is a breakdown of these two phases, transitional versus definite. We're currently, as I said, in the transitional one. What you need to do here is basically you need to report on the emissions of products that were produced in third countries, so basically outside of the EU, that were imported into the EU. And every 4 months, basically, you need to report on these emissions for the previous 3 months. You have all the deadlines upcoming here for the rest of the definite period.